Close your eyes. Let the fire burn low. Let the walls breathe around you. Let the shadows crawl a little closer. I'm going to tell you a story you think you know, a story about a girl, a slipper, a prince, a story of magic, midnight, and the comforting lie called happily ever after. You've heard this one since you were small, haven't you? The sparkling fairy godmother, the shimmering pumpkin carriage, the mice that turned into horses, bibbidi. Bibbidi boo, the glass slipper left on the palace stairs, the prince obsessed, searching the kingdom for the foot that fits. True love conquers all, good triumphs. Evil stepfamilies are punished only through mild embarrassment. Yes, a gentle story. A safe one. The kind of tale told to children to hush their fears, tuck them under blankets, whispering that goodness is always rewarded, and danger always fades before the morning sun. But you aren't a child anymore. The real story, the old story, whispered by grandmothers after the children pretended to sleep, that story is different. Much different. That story has blood in it. Screaming, shadows that linger. Birds that do not forget, birds that do not forgive. It does not end with a kiss. It ends with something waiting in your dreams, sharp-beaked, patient, watching. Let me tell you that story instead. The story the brothers Grimm collected from weather-worn German villagers who spoke in hushed tones so the dark wouldn't hear them. The story that survived centuries because it carried a truth too heavy to speak aloud. Let me tell you about Ashenputtel, not Cinderella. Cinderella is French, polished, perfumed, prettied. Her real name was Ashenputtel. Ashenfool, the girl in the ashes. The child coated in soot, in filth, in humiliation. Are you comfortable? Good. Pull your blanket a little closer, because this story begins not with magic, but with death. Her name was Ashenputtel. She was only 14 when her mother called her for the last time. This was Germany, not the storybook Germany of colorful cottages and cheery songs. No, this was a time before electricity, before medicine, before anyone understood why a body decayed from the inside, why fevers melted bone, why breath rattled until it simply stopped. In those days, death did not knock. He walked straight in. He came for babies in winter, for mothers in childbirth, for anyone who caught a sickness that settled deep, tightening its grip until nothing remained. Ashenputtel had watched her mother fade for months. The neighbors called it the wasting sickness, a quiet, cruel illness that ate you slowly. Skin stretching thin like fragile parchment, bones rising through flesh like jagged stones. Eyes growing too large, too bright, as if staring at something no one else could see. Ashenputtel fed her mother broth that cooled untouched. She wiped the sweat from her brow. She changed the soaked nightgowns. She spoke of the chickens, the weather, anything except the truth creeping into the room like a cold draft. Then came the final morning, a cruel early spring day where the last snow melted into dirty, patchy grief. Her mother whispered, "Dear child, remain pious and good, and God will protect you. I will watch you from heaven." Ashenputtel sobbed, clutching her mother's fading hand. Then, something the polished versions never repeat, her mother spoke again. A final sentence sharp as a blade wrapped in love. "Plant a hazel branch on my grave. Water it with your tears. When you need me, go to that tree. Go to my grave. I will help you, I promise." Her mother's eyes closed. And death, already waiting at the foot of the bed, took her. The funeral was small, muted, drenched in the silence only grief can carve. Her father, a wealthy merchant, always traveling, always elsewhere, stood red-eyed and rigid. The priest murmured Latin words Ashenputtel did not understand. The earth thudded heavily over her mother's coffin. Ashenputtel knelt in the cold mud. She planted the hazel branch in the freshly turned soil, and then she cried. Tears, real, heavy, endless, soaked the branch as if they were the water that might coax her mother back from the dirt. For days she returned, for weeks. Her tears kept the branch alive. Her father, however, moved on. He loved his wife in his own way, but he was practical, calculating. A household needed a woman, a daughter needed a mother, and a wealthy man needed a wife. 6 months later, he remarried. The new wife arrived shrouded in quiet elegance, a widow with a face carved from cold marble. Her 2 daughters followed, older than Ashenputtel, sharper, beautiful in the way predators are beautiful. Sleek, dangerous, smiling without warmth. In public they called her little sister. They praised her hair, her dress, her needlework. But their kindness lasted only as long as her father's footsteps echoed in the hall. Because the moment he left, and he always left for weeks at a time, the masks cracked. The stepmother looked at Ashenputtel as a butcher studies a lamb. She saw it immediately. A younger, softer, prettier girl, a girl who might one day compete with her daughters for suitors, inheritance, and the future they desperately clung to. And in that cold, assessing stare, Ashenputtel's fate shifted. Not by magic, not by a fairy godmother, but by the silent calculation of a woman who feared being replaced. A storm had entered the house, and Ashenputtel was standing directly in its path. Every darkness begins with a choice. A decision made quietly behind closed doors where no one can hear the bones snapping beneath it. For Ashenputtel's stepmother, that choice was simple. She saw a girl who carried a claim, a threat. A daughter who could someday take what she wanted, kept untouched for her own blood. To her, Ashenputtel wasn't family. She was a problem, and problems must be solved. On the 3rd day after the father left, the stepmother stepped into the kitchen. Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides razors behind its tongue. "You're dressed far too fine for your station," she said. Ashenputtel paused, startled, still wearing the silk her father had bought her before he left. It was one of the only soft things she had left in the world. The stepmother's eyes traveled over her like a butcher deciding where to cut. "Take off that dress. From now on, you'll wear rags, servants' clothes. More suitable for what you'll be doing." Ashenputtel blinked. "What I'll be doing, but I'm my father's." The stepmother moved closer, smiling a predator's smile. "Your father," she whispered, soft as a knife sliding into flesh, "is not here. And when he returns, if you say one word, about how you've been treated, I will make you wish you'd been buried with your mother." Ashenputtel understood. They took her clothes, her room, her place in the world. They gave her rags. They gave her ashes. They gave her work that had no end. She woke before dawn, before the roosters, before any warmth touched the earth. She lit the fires, fetched water so heavy it chewed her hands raw, prepared breakfast, scrubbed floors until her knees bled through her dress, washed clothes with cold water that bit her bones. And when she was finished, there were always more tasks waiting. Every sunrise brought the same punishment. Her hair became a tangled, matted halo of ash. Her skin cracked. Her nails tore. Her back bent under the endless weight of chores no child should know. Still, she did them. She had no choice. At night, long after the house went silent, she curled into the ashes beside the dying fire. The warmth barely reached her. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Her bed was soot. Her blanket was grief. The stepsisters watched her fall apart with blooming satisfaction. They would call her into their rooms with exaggerated sweetness. "Oh, Ashenputtel, be a dear, will you?" And then they'd make her lace their corsets so tight her fingers trembled, comb their hair until her arms shook, fetch their ribbons, their shoes, their perfume. They'd accidentally knock over vases, spill oil across the floors she'd just scrubbed, track mud through every corner of the house. Their laughter was sharp, mean, metallic. At last, they gave her a new name. "Look at Ashenputtel," they'd say. "The little ash fool covered in cinders. You'd never think she was a merchant's daughter." She looks like something dragged in from the gutter. Ashenputtel said nothing. Silence was safer. But every insult left a bruise somewhere inside her, in places no one could see. When her father finally returned, heavy with goods and gifts, Ashenputtel believed, just for a heartbeat, that his arrival would save her. Surely he would see the truth. Surely he would look at her and recognize the child he once held. Surely her suffering had been carved so deeply into her that it would be impossible to miss. But the stepmother had prepared everything. She greeted him with warmth, hospitality, gentle touches. Her daughters, polished and smiling, appeared charming as ever. And then there was Ashenputtel, a filthy shadow in the corner. Dirty, silent, thin, exactly what the stepmother wanted him to see. "She's been difficult," the stepmother sighed. "I've tried to help her, truly, but she refuses to behave. I'm afraid she's taken too well acting like a scullery maid." The father frowned, troubled. He turned toward Ashenputtel, and in her eyes, hollow from exhaustion, shimmering with tears she tried not to cry, she begged him silently, "See me, please see me, please save me." But grief makes cowards of men, and comfort blinds them. The father saw only what he wished to see, a troublesome child, a burden, a painful reminder of a wife he had lost and did not want to mourn anymore. "Be more helpful to your mother," he told her. "Show gratitude. I work hard to provide for this family. The least you can do is be pleasant." He walked away. Ashenputtel returned to her ashes, and something inside her, a final fragile thread of hope, curled in on itself and died. After that, she stopped waiting for rescue, because rescue was never coming. When the house finally went still, when even cruelty grew tired and drifted into sleep, Ashenputtel would slip out the back door like a ghost escaping its cage. She walked the same path every night, barefoot, silent, a thin silhouette moving through the darkness toward the churchyard, toward the only place that still remembered her. The hazel tree had grown tall, too tall for the years that had passed, as though something beneath the earth had been feeding it, urging it upward, stretching its branches toward the heavens like pleading hands. Its leaves shivered even on windless nights. Its trunk felt warm, as though it still held her mother's last breath. Ashenputtel would sit beneath it, back pressed against the bark, and she would cry, not pretty tears, not soft, maidenly sorrow. No, these were deep animal sobs, the kind that split the chest open, the kind she smothered with her fists so the stepmother wouldn't hear, and the tree listened. The branches would rustle though the air was still. Shadows moved in its leaves like something shifting just out of sight. And then the birds came. Small white birds, dozens of them, arriving silently, as if born from the dark itself. They perched on the branches, heads tilted, watching her with bright, sharp, knowing eyes. Birds that remembered everything. Under that tree, Ashenputtel poured out her suffering, the stepmother's cold cruelty, the stepsisters' daily tortures, her father's blindness, the endless labor that stole her childhood inch by inch. "Help me," she whispered. "Please, Mama, you promised. Please, I can't do this anymore." Sometimes the birds chirped softly, almost mournfully. Sometimes they fell silent, listening with eerie stillness, like witnesses gathering for a verdict. Night after night, for 3 long years, 3 years of rising before dawn, 3 years of sleeping in soot, 3 years of bones aching, hands cracking, and spirit thinning. She was 17 now, a girl scraped down to her last thin layer of hope. The stepsisters, 19 and 21, were reaching the age when beauty began to dull, when mothers grew desperate to secure marriages before time stole their chances. The stepmother knew this, and she was afraid. If she failed to marry them off soon, all her schemes would collapse. All her sacrifices, including Ashenputtel, would have been for nothing. So when the knock came one early spring morning, everything changed. A royal messenger stood at the door, dressed in velvet trimmed with gold. He handed over a scroll sealed with the prince's crest, a proclamation, a command, 3 nights, 3 grand balls at the palace. Every unmarried maiden in the kingdom was required to attend. Not invited, summoned. The stepmother's eyes lit with hunger. The house erupted like a kicked beehive. Seamstresses rushed in. Threads flew, fabric piled across tables. Perfume bottles clattered. The stepsisters shrieked and preened and fought over ribbons. This was their chance to escape their own mediocrity, to rise, to marry into royalty, to secure a future dripping with gold. And in the shadows, Ashenputtel watched, silent, invisible, but listening. Every maiden must attend, every maiden. A dangerous little hope unfurled inside her. A tiny flame she tried to smother, but it refused to die. On the eve before the first ball, the house buzzed with frantic preparation. The stepsisters twirled before the mirror. The stepmother barked orders like a general readying a siege, and Ashenputtel forced herself to speak. "Mother," she whispered, the word bitter in her throat, the lie burning her tongue. The room froze. The stepsisters stared. The stepmother's eyes sharpened like knives. "The invitation said every maiden must attend," Ashenputtel continued. May I go to the ball?" Silence. A slow, cruel smile spread across the stepmother's face. "You," she purred. "You Ashenputtel, dressed in rags, stinking of smoke, you want to dance with the prince?" Ashenputtel swallowed. "I could wash. You have nothing to wear," one sister snapped. "You'd go in your nightgown." "In rags," the other added. "You'd disgrace us." The stepmother held up her hand. "Now, girls, let's be fair," she said, false sweetness dripping from every syllable. "If Ashenputtel wants to go to the ball, she should be allowed to." The stepsisters gasped. The stepmother walked calmly to the hearth. A bowl of lentils, small brown seeds meant for tomorrow's soup, sat on the table. With a single smooth motion, she dumped the entire bowl into the cold ashes. Hundreds of tiny seeds vanished into the soot. The stepmother turned. "Pick them out," she said softly. "All of them, every single lentil. You have 2 hours. If you can clean them and return them to the bowl before we leave," she smiled, a smile sharp enough to cut. "Then yes, you may attend." A beat. "We'll even find you something to wear." The stepsisters dissolved into laughter. Ashenputtel stared down at the impossible task. Hours of work, maybe more. There was no way to finish in time, but it was a chance, her only chance. She knelt in the ashes, tears burning her eyes. Her fingers trembled as she began sorting lentils one by one, while upstairs the others dressed themselves in silk and jewels. Ashes clung to her skin. Smoke stung her throat. Her back screamed in pain, but she worked, driven by hope so fragile it could snap at any moment. Hope is a fragile thing. It flickers, it trembles, and if you aren't careful, someone will snuff it out. An hour passed. Her breath was coming in shuddering gasps. She had barely sorted a quarter of the lentils. The rest were buried in the gray-black dust like bones waiting to be exhumed. It was impossible. The smoke stung her eyes so badly she could hardly see. Every inhale scraped her lungs like inhaling ground glass. Her back screamed from the endless bending. Still she worked. Desperation is stronger than pain. Then a soft flutter, a disturbance in the stillness. She looked up. At first she thought the shadows themselves were moving. Then they separated, forming wings. The birds, the same white birds from the hazel tree. But here in the dark kitchen they looked different, moon-pale, eyes reflecting the firelight like tiny cold lanterns. Dozens of them, no more. They crawled over the windowsill, gliding silently into the room as if pulled by an unseen command. Without hesitation, they began to work. Their beaks flicked through the ashes with unnatural precision, not frantic, not chaotic, surgical. Coordinated, intelligent. They worked faster than human hands ever could, tiny pale shapes diving, sorting, separating. She froze, watching them with wide, disbelieving eyes. A tear rolled down her smoke-smeared cheek. Thank you," she whispered. The birds didn't look at her, not yet. And within an hour, an impossible hour, the task was finished. The lentils gleamed in the bowl, clean as river stones, untouched by soot. The stepmother's cruelty had been undone by something far older, far stranger. The house vibrated with rustling silk, clinking jewelry, perfume thick enough to choke on. She stood in the center of the kitchen, bowl in her hands, heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. "Well, you've done it," the stepmother said. She took the bowl slowly, examining it like a jeweler judging a counterfeit gem. "I can come, you said," she tried to speak. "I said we'd find you something to wear," the stepmother said. She set the bowl down with a gentle tap. "I never promised to take you with us." The words hit her like a physical blow. The stepsisters glided past her, faces twisted into triumphant smirks. "She'd embarrass us, look at her. Even silk can't bury the stench of ashes." Her father came last. He paused in the doorway, just long enough to see her broken expression, then lowered his eyes and followed his wife. He didn't say a word, not one. She stood in the empty kitchen, shaking. The house was quiet, too quiet. It felt like a tomb. Then she ran. Bursting out the door, she flew across the garden, past the fences, over the fields, feet pounding the earth like something wild and hunted. The sky was ink black. The moon hung low and distorted, slipping behind clouds like it couldn't bear witness. She reached the hazel tree and collapsed. Years of pain poured out of her, grief, loss, betrayal, all the tears she had swallowed, all the screams she had buried. Her voice cracked against the dirt. She wasn't crying anymore. She was breaking. Silence. Then a rustle. She lifted her head. The birds were here, all of them, perched on every branch. Dozens, hundreds, maybe more, until the tree looked alive with shifting white feathers. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, as if reflecting some brighter light she could not see. They began to sing. It was not a song meant for human ears. It was low, vibrational, a humming that resonated in her bones. It sounded like a language older than kingdoms, older than graves, older even than sorrow. A language of bargains, a language of things that listen. "Little tree, shake and shiver, throw gold and silver down to me," she whispered. The branches trembled, not from wind. There was no wind, the tree shook itself deliberately. Slowly, powerfully, something fell, a dress. It hit the ground with a soft shimmer, folding like moonlight spilled onto soil. She reached out with trembling hands. It wasn't made of fabric, not truly. It looked woven from threads of night mist, moonbeams, and something softer than silk but colder than water. Silver melted into gold, then into frost gray as she turned it. It breathed like it was alive. And then the shoes, not glass, no, these were golden slippers, cold, gleaming, impossibly delicate, shaped as if they had been molded to her feet before she was even born. She stared at them, awed, frightened, yearning. The birds watched her with their round, knowing eyes. Something in their gaze felt almost human. Thank you," she choked, gratitude spilling from her lips. She didn't question it. She didn't dare. Magic rarely offers itself twice. Under the gaze of the moon and the unblinking choir of white birds, she peeled off her ash-smeared rags and slipped into the dress. As the fabric slid over her skin, she felt something shift, like stepping into a life that was waiting for her, like shedding the girl she used to be, a transformation not of beauty but of destiny. Some gifts are blessings, others are traps woven in gold, and magic always demands its price. The dress fit perfectly, uncannily so, as though someone or something had measured every inch of her in the dark while she slept. It clung to her like a second skin, cool and alive, pulsing faintly with a soft, silver luminescence. When she slipped on the golden shoes, they hummed a soft, ringing sound like distant bells heard underwater. And without understanding why, she started walking. No road, no carriage, no lantern, only moonlight and instinct. Yet the forest parted for her as if obeying an ancient allegiance. The distance that should have taken hours felt like nothing more than a drifting dream. Every turn was familiar. Every shadow stepped aside. By the time she reached the palace gates, the first notes of music were swelling through the air like the night itself was breathing. The guards saw her, stopped, stared, not with suspicion but awe. A girl made of moonlight and mist, shimmering gold at the edges. They bowed her through without question. Inside the palace, the world turned blinding with beauty. Chandeliers burned like captured suns, dripping molten gold. Strings of crystal refracted the candlelight into shards of color that danced along the marble floor. Musicians hovered in a balcony above, violins whispering, flutes sighing, cellos groaning like ghosts forced to perform. The ballroom moved like a whirlpool of silk and jewels. She stopped in the archway, breath caught. She, a girl who had scrubbed ashes off floors until her fingers bled, now stood inside the dream she had never dared to imagine. And then someone saw her. The prince was slumped near the throne, barely listening to the endless introductions of eligible daughters, duchesses, and beautifully crafted puppets. His expression was numb, dulled by obligation, until she appeared. It was instantaneous, as if something in him recognized something in her, something ancient, magnetic, inevitable. The room blurred, the music dulled, the chatter muted. He cut through the crowd like a blade through silk, ignoring bows, ignoring voices, ignoring formality entirely. When he stopped in front of her, he bowed not out of politeness but devotion. "I don't know you. No, you don't." "Then let me learn." He offered his hand, and she took it. For 3 full hours they danced. 3 hours in which the world outside their movement ceased to exist. He did not look at another girl, did not speak to another soul. His eyes remained fixed on her, drinking her in like someone starved. Ashenputtel felt herself rising, lifted by the music, the warmth, the impossible kindness in his gaze. For the first time since childhood, she felt weightless, felt human, felt alive. In a corner of the ballroom, her stepmother watched like a viper coiled to strike. "Who is she?" she hissed. "A foreign princess, she must be. Look at that dress. She's no one, she has to be no one." But even they heard the lie. The prince didn't care who she was. He cared only that she existed in his arms. And then the first deep toll of the clock, she froze mid-step, her pulse skidded to panic. "What's wrong?" he asked. I have to go," she whispered. He reached for her, confusion twisting into fear. "Go, but the night has." She didn't let him finish. She tore herself away, her dress flaring like spilled starlight, and ran, through dancers, through courtiers, down the staircase. He called her name, though he didn't know it, and sprinted after her, shoving past startled nobles. But she was faster. She moved like something chased by fate. By the time she reached the hazel tree, her lungs burned. Her heart thrashed like a trapped bird. She stripped off the dress. It dissolved between her fingers, not fading but evaporating like moon silk exposed to dawn. The gold slippers she hid inside the hollow trunk. Within minutes she was back in the kitchen, curled in the familiar ashes. Her stepfamily returned, buzzing with gossip. Who was the girl? Where had she come from? Why had the prince ignored everyone else? She listened from the hearth, silent, smiling into the shadows. For the first time in years, she had something of her own. A secret, a memory, a single beautiful night, but beautiful nights are never the end. The next evening she returned to the hazel tree. The birds were waiting. The dress that fell this time was even more exquisite, spun silver and pale pearl glowing like frost under starlight. Again she went to the palace. Again the prince's face lit with relief, hunger, longing. "You came back." "I did. I thought I dreamed you. I'm real." They danced again, closer, slower. The prince asked questions she refused to answer. Every mystery made him more desperate. Then the clock tolled. She fled again. This time he chased her through the corridors, down the steps, out into the night, calling guards to stop her, shouting orders, breath ragged. But she slipped away. Smoke in the dark, a ghost in gold. The prince stood trembling at the top of the marble steps, chest heaving, eyes burning with something dangerously close to obsession. This was no longer infatuation. It was hunger. Tomorrow is the final night. She will not escape. He summoned servants, guards, advisors, magicians. Coat the palace steps with pitch, tar, sap, anything that clings, make the stairs a trap, make them a snare. If she runs, I will take what she leaves behind. A snare had been set. And the third night would not be a dance, but a hunt. Every kingdom has its rituals, every legend its altar. But this was not a search for love, it was a hunt. A hunt for a girl who no longer believed she existed. The prince had not slept since the ball. Not truly, not peacefully. He wandered the palace grounds at night, pacing the corridors like a restless ghost, replaying the memory of a golden dress shimmering under candlelight, and a girl whose name he did not know. Every corner of his kingdom was turned inside out in the days that followed. Every town square felt the tremor of hooves, armor, and royal decree. Obsession is a delicate poison, and the prince drank deeply. Meanwhile, in the cold ashes of the hearth, Ashenputtel lay curled like a dying ember. She knew the truth now. Magic is a bruise, beautiful at first, then it darkens, then it hurts. Tonight had been the last illusion, the last whisper of a world where she mattered. Sometimes the cruelest part of magic is knowing when it ends. Her golden shoes, one still on her foot, one lost to the tar, had been a promise she could never keep. When the final night arrived, the tree gifted her a dress unlike anything that had ever breathed in mortal light. It was not gold. It was molten sunlight trapped in cloth. It glittered like a warning. It sang like a cathedral bell. It whispered like a spell cast by something far older than fairy tales. When she walked into the ballroom, the prince didn't just see her. He devoured the sight of her as though starving. He seized her hand, breathless, desperate. "Promise me you won't run, please." His voice cracked. His eyes shone with fear. Love should not tremble, but obsession does. Ashenputtel felt hope flicker inside her, dangerous, bright, foolish hope. For a moment she imagined telling him the truth, revealing the girl of ashes beneath the girl of gold. But dreams die under daylight, and midnight was coming. The clock began to toll. No, not yet. Not again, but she was already running. Her golden dress bled behind her like the tail of a falling star. The guests gasped as she tore through the hall, a vision of beauty collapsing into panic. Then her foot stuck. The tar clung to her shoe like a hungry mouth. She wrenched free, but the golden slipper did not come with her. She limped into the darkness, one foot bare, one still shod, heart pounding like a trapped animal. The prince reached the stair and stared down at the gleaming shoe caught in the tar. When he lifted it, something inside him broke, and something else began. He sent riders to every corner of the kingdom with a single order. "Bring me the foot that fits this shoe." Not the girl, not the name, not the story, just the foot. And so the kingdom trembled under the weight of a golden slipper and a prince who refused to accept loss. 3 weeks later at Ashenputtel's home, doom arrived not with thunder but with a knock. The stepmother froze, then her skin went pale and her voice turned sharp as a blade. "Hide her, now!" She struck Ashenputtel across the face. The girl tasted blood, up the stairs, into the attic. Darkness swallowed her whole. Below she heard voices, chairs scraping, silk rustling, her stepsisters breathing nervously. "Bring forth the daughters." The eldest stepsister floated forward like a queen in training, chin high, lips poised, eyes gleaming with ambition. She sat upon the chair like it was already a throne. The steward knelt. He lifted the golden slipper. Beauty is not enough. Ambition is not enough, not for a story soaked in blood and ash. There are moments in a legend when a story stops being a story and becomes something else. Something sharp, something wet. Something you wish you could unhear. This was one of those moments. The eldest stepsister extended her foot with practiced elegance, chin lifted, lips curled into a confident smile. But confidence is fragile. The steward gently guided the golden slipper toward her foot, and it stopped. Immediately. Her toes were too long, her foot too wide. The delicate curve of the shoe rejected her like a living thing refusing a parasite. She forced her smile wider, desperate, strained. "Perhaps if I pointed my toes—" "I'm sorry, miss. It doesn't fit." The stepmother's face hardened, not with disappointment, but with a cold, simmering fury. Ice behind her eyes, steel beneath her voice. Her second daughter stepped forward next. Same confidence, same poise, same result. The golden slipper refused her too. The steward began to offer the polite farewell he had given in countless houses, his voice weary, rehearsed, when the stepmother did something that froze the room. "Wait!" Heads turned. "My daughter is nervous." So much pressure, perhaps if she had a moment to compose herself, just a moment, in private. The steward hesitated. The request was unusual, suspicious. But something in the woman's voice, sweet, trembling, desperate, pricked a small thread of pity in him. He granted 5 minutes, a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. The stepmother gripped her eldest daughter's wrist and guided her to a small side room. The same cramped room where Ashenputtel had once been handed rags and told she belonged to ashes. The door shut with a click. The daughter's voice shook. "Number mother, no. Listen to me. That shoe is our salvation, your salvation. A crown, a throne, a life without fear, without hunger, without limits. Do you understand what I'm offering you? But it won't fit. It will fit if we make it fit." "You mean cut?" "Only the very tip of your big toe, just a sliver, a moment of pain, a lifetime of power." The girl trembled. Her breaths grew ragged, uneven. "It will hurt. Yes, I'll bleed. Yes, but afterward I'll be queen. You'll be queen. Give me the knife." "No, please, no. Number, let me do it. You'll flinch. You'll ruin it. I've butchered chickens. I know where to cut. Sit down and give me your foot." Then a scream. A scream so raw, so animal, so full of agony that Ashenputtel clamped both hands over her mouth to keep from crying out with her. The scream climbed, rose, shattered, then cut off abruptly as though smothered. Then came sobbing, choking, wet. "Hold still, I'm not finished. The edges must be clean or the blood won't stop." Another scream, muffled, broken. Ashenputtel backed away, shaking so hard she could barely breathe. She tried the door. It was bolted. She was trapped with the sound of suffering seeping through the walls like a curse she could never escape. At last, footsteps descended the stairs. Slow, uneven, dragging, the parlor door opened. The eldest stepsister stood there, pale as death, sweat shimmering on her skin, hands trembling violently. But her mother smiled for both of them. "She's ready. Nerves, you understand." The girl sat barely. Her smile was a grimace, a rictus of agony. "Miss, are you well?" "Perfectly well. Please try the shoe." He knelt. He lifted her foot. She flinched, breath hissing but forced stillness. The golden slipper slid on, smoothly, perfectly, beautifully. Too perfectly. The steward looked at the foot, at the girl's shaking hands, at the stepmother's expectant smile. "It fits." 3 weeks. That's how long the prince's men searched. 3 weeks of knocking on doors, disturbing dreams, and chasing a ghost made of moonlight and memory. And by the end of it, even the loyal steward began to doubt the girl in the golden slipper had ever existed at all. But that morning, that cursed morning, a door opened that should never have been answered. The stepmother greeted them with a smile sharp enough to slit a throat. Of course it fits. My daughter was at the ball. She danced with the prince. Surely he mentioned her? The steward hesitated. The prince hadn't mentioned anyone by name, just fragments. Beautiful, perfect, like a dream, and the girl in front of him was beautiful, but pale, unnaturally pale, as if something vital had already been drained from her. He should have listened to his instincts, but exhaustion clouds judgment, and desperation blinds even the most loyal. Please come with us. The prince will want to see you immediately. The stepsister rose carefully, too carefully, gripping his hand as though each movement might shatter her. She took a step, then another, her gait stiff, unnatural, a puppet walking on borrowed limbs. She's nervous, the steward told himself, but nerves don't make you walk like your bones are fragile glass. My daughter will need a moment to gather her things. The prince was clear. I'm to bring the girl to him immediately. She can send for her belongings after the wedding. The stepmother smiled, a victory smile, bloated with satisfaction. Of course, go, my dear, your future waits. They escorted the girl into the carriage. On the second step, she faltered, just for a breath, and let out a tiny, strangled sound. Pain. But the steward was too worn, too hopeful, too human to hear it. The carriage door closed with a final, coffin-like thud. Ashenputtel lay in the attic, curled like a shadow, her eyes raw. Her throat scraped dry from sobbing. She had heard everything, every word, every lie. Her stepsister had done the unimaginable, carved herself like a sacrificial offering in exchange for a crown, and it had worked. The shoe fit. The test was passed. The dream was dead. For 3 nights she had stepped into a borrowed life. 3 nights she had tasted wonder. 3 nights she had mattered. But fairy tales rot. Fairy tales crumble, and not for girls covered in ashes. She drifted into a thin, exhausted sleep. A mercy, a fragile mercy, but mercy never lasts long in this house. The front door flew open. Ashenputtel jolted awake. Her stepmother's voice ripped through the house, high and terrified. What do you mean, the shoe fit? You saw it fit. And another voice answered, furious, shaken. What did you do? What did you do to that girl? The truth had returned home, carried on wings. Because 20 minutes into the journey, just as the carriage rounded a bend in the road, the birds appeared. Dozens of them, silent, white, unblinking. They descended onto the carriage roof like a snowfall of ghosts. The horses screamed and slowed. Shoo, get away! But they didn't move. Instead, they began to sing, not pretty, not human, not natural, a harsh, scraping cadence like bone against stone. The steward felt something cold crawl up his spine. Because the birds were not singing a melody, they were singing words. Turn and look, there's blood in the shoe's too tight, this bride's not right, she's not the true one sitting there beside you. The girl trembled. Her face drained of all remaining color. Miss, lift your foot. Don't, she whispered. Please don't make me, but he insisted, and she obeyed. The slipper glittered flawless until he saw it, a dark stain blooming at the toe, red, thick, wet. Growing, his breath hitched. He removed the shoe, and the world went red. The blood did not drip, it spilled, it poured, it erupted as if the slipper itself had been holding back a tide. The cushions soaked, the floor stained. The smell of iron filled the air. Her foot was a nightmare of flesh and bone. The toe wasn't injured. It was gone, severed, carved, cut away like unwanted fabric. The steward gagged, the girl sobbed. Please, please, I can explain, we can hide it, the prince won't. You mutilated yourself to deceive the prince, the birds cooed behind them, a low, satisfied, chilling sound as the carriage turned back. They marched into the house, the bleeding girl leaving a trail of dark red moons on the polished floor. The stepmother froze. She didn't need to ask. The failure was written in blood. You have perpetrated a fraud. You mutilated your daughter and tried to pass her off as the prince's bride. She would have healed, no one would have. No one would have known the prince was deceived. Married a girl with a severed toe, married a lie. He turned away. Get her to a physician before she dies, and you are fortunate I do not have you arrested. But the stepmother wasn't listening. Her plans were collapsing, her future evaporating. Wait, wait, I have another daughter, perhaps. The steward turned back, incredulous. Another daughter, another chance at deceit, another victim waiting quietly in the wings of a story that had already soaked itself in blood. Yes, the stepmother said, her voice smooth and dangerous. Another daughter. Perhaps the shoe will fit her. Perhaps she is the one at the ball. Let her try. Fine, the steward replied, cold and grim. Bring her, but if there is any sign of injury, I will summon the magistrate within the hour. The second daughter had heard everything, the screams, the stepmother's cruel instructions, the wet, shuddering sobs of her sister. She knew exactly what she would be asked to do. It has to be you now, the stepmother whispered urgently. Your sister failed, you are our only chance. Mother, they'll see, they'll know, the girl trembled. Then be smarter, her mother hissed. Not the toe this time, the heel, cut off the back of your foot, stuff cloth in the shoe, walk barely, just enough, just long enough for the prince to commit. The second daughter stared, seeing madness in her mother's eyes, absolute desperate madness. You're insane, she whispered. I am practical, the stepmother snapped. Your sister made a sacrifice, now it is your turn, or would you rather stay here? No dowry, no future, no chance. Are you brave enough to take it? Ashenputtel in the attic pressed her hands to her ears. She couldn't shut it out. She had to bear witness. The girl's voice came hollow, defeated, a trembling surrender. Give me the knife. I'll do it, the stepmother said. Sit. A chair scraped. Breathing grew frantic and uneven. Close your eyes, it will be over quickly. Do you want to be queen? The girl let out a long, trembling breath. Yes, and then came the scream. It tore through the house, raw and animalistic, worse than before. Because this time Ashenputtel knew what was happening. She could imagine the knife, the flesh, the blood. The sound of a life being carved away for ambition. The scream lasted forever. Then came ragged sobbing and the stepmother's calm, methodical instructions, bandages, pressure, control. Driven by terror, rage, and helplessness, Ashenputtel found herself pounding on the attic door. Stop! Stop it! Stop hurting them! But no one heard, or no one cared. Minutes later, the second stepsister limped into the parlor. Her face was bloodless, a mask of agony barely held in place. She sat silent and extended her foot. The steward approached cautiously, suspicion rising inside him. Are you injured? No, sir. You're certain if I find any harm? I haven't, sir. Please just try the shoe. He knelt. He slipped the golden slipper onto her foot. It fit. Perfectly, the toe seated neatly. The heel looked fine, barely a limp, perhaps nerves, he thought. Could this be the true girl, or was this another lie? Come, he said quietly. The prince is waiting. The girl rose slowly, every step deliberate, controlled, measured. The carriage began to roll, and then the birds returned, white and countless, descending like a snowstorm of ghosts. Their song rose, harsh and broken. Turn and look, turn and look. There's blood in the shoe's too tight. This bride is not right, she's not the true one. The steward clenched his teeth, not again. He looked down. The golden shoe shone, flawless on the surface, but something inside him screamed. Something told him this was wrong. The girl trembled beside him and whispered, barely audible, terrified, "Please, I just want to go home." His stomach churned. He looked at the shoe in his hand, at the frightened, trembling girl, and realized the nightmare was far from over. The kingdom had not seen the last of cruelty. Not yet. Not while ambition, blood, and magic still danced together in the shadow of a golden slipper. The prince's search had grown twisted and cruel. Two daughters had mutilated themselves for a crown and failed. But the third, the true one, the girl hidden in ashes, untouched by greed, still waited. The royal steward arrived at the house again, furious. "You did it again," he shouted. "What kind of mother mutilates her own children?" The stepmother tried to defend herself, but her voice trembled. Then the father spoke quietly, almost swallowed by the chaos. "There's one more, from my first marriage. She's in the attic." The steward froze. "The attic? She's just a servant," the stepmother insisted, panic rising. "Not suitable, she didn't even go to the ball." "Bring her down," the steward ordered. Now, in the attic, Ashenputtel crouched in the dim light as the stepmother stormed up the stairs. She unlocked the door and yanked her out. "You say one word about what you heard," the stepmother hissed, "and I will kill you." Ashenputtel stayed silent as she was dragged downstairs and pushed into the parlor. The steward looked at her, covered in ash, her hair tangled, her dress in rags, her hands rough from years of hard labor. And yet something about her presence made him pause. "Sit," he said gently. She lowered herself into the chair. The steward knelt, holding the golden slipper. "Foot." She extended it, dirty, scarred, calloused. He slid the slipper on. It fit perfectly. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It actually fits. No forcing, no stuffing. No blood." He looked up through the soot and exhaustion and saw her face clearly for the first time. "Stand." She rose gracefully, effortless, natural, nothing like the stepsisters' stiff, pained movements. "It's you," he breathed. "You're the girl from the ball." Ashenputtel nodded. Behind her, the stepmother made a strangled sound, rage mixed with disbelief. The steward stood and bowed to the ash-covered girl. "My lady, the prince has been searching for you. Will you accompany us to the palace?" Ashenputtel smiled, small, tired, but real. "Yes, I'll come." She was washed, dressed, and restored, her true appearance emerging beneath the soot. When she stepped back into the room, there was no doubt left. The eyes, the face, the way she carried herself. She was the prince's mystery dancer. She was helped into the carriage, the golden slipper on one foot, the other left bare until the matching shoe could be fetched from the palace. White birds gathered again, not shrieking warnings this time, but singing, circling, celebrating. They perched on the carriage, on the horses, following her through the kingdom. The true bride was finally on her way. The nightmare of greed and mutilation would not reach the prince. Ashenputtel, the girl in the ashes, was stepping into the light at last. The prince sat alone in his study, morning light falling across scattered papers. He looked exhausted, hopeless. Twice he had been told she was found, and twice he had been deceived. The steward entered urgently. "Your Highness, we found her." The prince didn't move, his voice flat. "You're certain? The shoe fits perfectly," the steward said, "and I think you should see for yourself." In the throne room, a single beam of sunlight fell across Ashenputtel. She stood in a simple borrowed dress, her hair still damp, the golden slipper glinting softly. Her beauty wasn't extravagant, it was real, unadorned, undeniable. The prince froze at the doorway. It was her, truly her. He crossed the room quickly and took her hands, his voice trembling. "It's you, I thought I'd lost you, I thought I'd never see you again." "I'm sorry," Ashenputtel whispered. "I ran, I didn't tell you." "I don't care where you came from or why you ran," he said, gentle but firm. "You're here, you're real. That's all that matters." He studied her closely now, the calloused hands, the tired eyes, the quiet strength shaped by years of hardship. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. Ashenputtel smiled, a small, heartbreaking smile. "That's a long story and not a very pretty one." "I want to hear it," he said, "all of it, but first—" He knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Your name, please tell me your name." "Ashenputtel," she said. "My name is Ashenputtel." He repeated it like a vow. "Ashenputtel, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my queen?" She looked down at the man who had loved her across 3 enchanted nights and searched the kingdom for her. Hope long buried rose inside her like light breaking through. "Yes," she said softly, "I'll marry you." He rose and kissed her as the court erupted in applause. Outside, white birds gathered, their songs rising in jubilant celebration. Preparations for the wedding began. Palace halls blossomed with flowers and garlands. Ashenputtel was cared for, healed, and gently pampered by attendants. Invitations were sent across the kingdom, even to the stepmother and stepsisters, who received them in outrage and disbelief. "You never have to go back there," the prince told her. "Never see them again unless you choose." "I want them there," Ashenputtel replied. He stared at her, stunned. "Why, after everything they did to you?" "I need them to see," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, determined. He didn't understand, but he respected her choice. On the morning of the wedding, the ancient stone church overflowed with beauty. White roses and lilies perfumed the air. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, scattering red, gold, and blue across the floor. Guests whispered with excitement. The entire kingdom had gathered to witness the union of the prince and the mysterious girl who vanished at midnight. Ashenputtel stood at the altar, radiant, not because of jewels, not because of silk, but because she was finally herself, whole, unbroken, and free. The nightmare of cruelty and desperation was over. The true bride had risen from the ashes. The prince had found not just a partner, but a soul strengthened by hardship and worthy of the crown she would wear. And the kingdom would remember this day for generations. The day truth prevailed, hope endured, and justice walked beside them all. The church was hushed, sunlight drifting through stained glass as the stepmother and her daughters made their slow, painful entrance. White birds hovered above them, their wings beating like a drum of judgment. Every flap echoed through the stone hall, a reminder of everything that had happened in that house. The stepmother's face was pale, her lips pressed into a hard, furious line. Her daughters leaned heavily on their canes, grimacing with every step. They moved stiffly, as if dragged forward by invisible strings, unable to escape the cold, unblinking eyes of the birds overhead. At the altar, Ashenputtel watched quietly. No anger, no gloating. Just recognition of what she had endured and survived. "I survived," she whispered to herself. "I endured, I won." The birds dipped lower, perching behind the stepmother and her daughters. Their beady black eyes gleamed with something ancient and unspoken. The congregation fell into an uneasy silence. Every wingbeat felt like a verdict. The stepmother tried to straighten her posture, forcing a mask of dignity over the terror in her eyes. Her daughters copied her, though each step was agony. Whispers rippled through the pews. "They did it to themselves. What horror, what punishment!" As the trio neared the altar, the birds shifted into a white canopy above Ashenputtel and the prince, framing them like a crown. The prince moved closer to her, protective, but Ashenputtel remained calm, almost glowing in the sunlight that spilled across her face. "Keep moving," the stepmother hissed at her daughters. "Don't falter." But the birds were relentless. A few landed on her shoulders, pecking lightly at her collar, a warning she could neither escape nor ignore. Her daughters flinched every time a bird rustled its wings, the sharp intelligence in those eyes following them without mercy. No one spoke. The nobles watched in a silence heavy with understanding. This was justice, slow, undeniable, absolute. The stepmother reached the final steps leading outside. She looked back at Ashenputtel, the girl she had tried to erase. Now radiant, now untouchable, and in that moment something inside the stepmother broke. The fury drained out of her, leaving only a hollow emptiness. The church doors opened, flooding the entrance with warm sunlight. The stepmother and her daughters stepped into it, birds trailing closely behind them. Outside, onlookers whispered in awe as the three shuffled across the palace gardens, transformed into a living warning. Inside, Ashenputtel turned to the prince. His eyes shone with love, relief, and something close to reverence. The congregation erupted in applause, a wave of sound rolling across the hall like a celebration set free. The birds circled once above the couple, satisfied, before scattering into the bright morning sky. And so the ashes yielded a princess. Cruelty and greed, practiced for years, could not stand against the truth. The girl who had been hidden, broken, and forgotten became queen. The false heirs of ambition walked away with scars, some visible, some carried in silence. Ashenputtel and the prince faced the congregation hand in hand. The kingdom saw not just a wedding, but a reckoning, the final chapter of a story carved in blood, fire, and quiet, unstoppable courage. The sun glinted off the golden slippers. The white birds vanished into the horizon, and a kingdom at last began to heal. The church fell silent as the stepmother and her daughters stumbled into the aisle, bloodied and half-blind. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Some stared in horror, others in disbelief. Above them, the white birds circled in a pale storm of feathers, silent, watchful, unyielding. Ashenputtel stood at the altar, steady and composed. There was no malice in her expression, no triumph, only the calm certainty of justice fulfilled. After everything they had done, she had survived, endured, remained whole. The prince held her hands tightly. "Are those your birds from the tree?" he whispered. Ashenputtel nodded, her eyes following the fleeing figures of her stepfamily. "They are. They watch, they protect, they deliver justice." Whispers flickered across the pews, some claiming witchcraft, others murmuring about divine punishment. But no one dared approach the birds, now perched above the hall like living guardians. With the stepfamily gone, the tension cracked and drifted away like smoke. The priest, trembling but determined, cleared his throat and continued the ceremony. "I pronounce you husband and wife." Ashenputtel simply whispered, "Please continue," steady and unshaken. The prince pulled her into a gentle kiss, soft, grateful, full of the promise of a future untouched by fear. Applause thundered through the church, though still tinged with awe. Outside, the birds sang in triumphant harmony, their voices rising like a hymn of restored order. Later that day, the palace gardens filled with guests for the reception. Many still walked cautiously, shaken by the morning's events. Conversations remained hushed, laughter tentative. But slowly joy began to seep back in. Music swelled. Wine flowed. Long tables bowed under the weight of lavish dishes. The prince guided Ashenputtel onto the dance floor. Her golden slippers sparkled like captured sunlight. Her dress glowed softly, embroidered with threads that shimmered at every turn. She moved with effortless grace, as though the years of pain and isolation melted away with every step. He twirled her, dipped her, lifted her into a moment of pure, unbroken joy. For the first time in years, Ashenputtel laughed, a bright, soft sound that filled the hall like warm light. Gradually, the nobles joined in, though still glancing at the white birds perched along balcony rails and garden branches, watching over everything with keen, knowing eyes. Ashenputtel breathed in the music, the light, the warmth of the evening air. The kingdom celebrated around her, but she stood at the center of it all, alive, free, and untouchable. The shadows of her past could no longer reach her here. The prince leaned close, whispering, "All of this for you." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. She had survived cruelty. She had endured injustice. And now she would rule not through fear, but through strength, wisdom, and mercy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the white birds rose into the sky, spreading their wings wide as they disappeared into the fading light. Free, just as she finally was. Ashenputtel glided across the ballroom floor, radiant as soft evening light filtered through the tall windows. She laughed at the prince's jokes, but there was a distant look in her eyes, a shadow resting beneath her joy. "Are you all right?" the prince asked, concern softening his voice. "I'm perfect," she answered, and she meant it. For the first time in her life, she was safe. She would never sleep in ashes again or scrub floors until her hands bled. She would never endure cruelty from the people who should have loved her. She had survived, she had won, but the victory tasted strange, bitter, and sweet at once. "The birds," the prince said carefully. "They're yours, aren't they? Connected to you somehow." Ashenputtel nodded. "They were my mother's. She sent them from the tree that grew on her grave. She promised she would help me, protect me, deliver justice." "Did you know this would happen?" he asked. She was silent for a long moment before answering. "I knew something would happen. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew there would be justice of a kind." "Justice," he repeated. She looked at him steadily. "They cut off parts of themselves, trying to take something that wasn't theirs. Now they'll live in darkness, paying for their mother's ambition and their own vanity. Is that justice? I don't know, but it's what happened." The prince wanted to argue, to speak of mercy, forgiveness, gentler endings. But he looked at her, at the girl who had endured years of humiliation and suffering, and he understood. Who was he to define justice for her? They continued dancing, moving as one while the palace thrummed with quiet reverence. A kingdom had witnessed her triumph, truth rising after years of silence. Meanwhile, the stepmother stumbled through the streets with her daughters clinging to her, each blind in one eye, terrified and bleeding. The townspeople stared and whispered, but no one stepped forward. Everyone knew their story. Everyone knew the cruelty they had inflicted. Let them suffer, people thought. Let them face what they created. Back inside their home, the stepmother barred the door. She tried to clean and bandage the girl's wounds, but she had no skill, no way to undo the damage. The daughters moaned quietly, still in shock. "It's your fault," the eldest said flatly. "You told us to cut ourselves, you promised it would work, you promised we'd be queens, and now look at us, for nothing." The younger trembled. "We're ruined. No one will marry us. No one will look at us. We're monsters. We cut off parts of ourselves because of you." They thought of Ashenputtel, whole, unbroken, beloved. "She has everything," the younger whispered. "And we have this." She touched her ruined face. The stepmother sank into a chair, confronted by the consequences of her own cruelty. "Get out," the eldest suddenly said. "Leave this house," the younger echoed. "We don't want you here. We don't want to see you. This is Ashenputtel's house now, our father's house. When he dies, it will pass to her. Everything will pass to her. We have nothing, and we won't share it with you." Wounded and limping, the daughters stood united in their anger. The stepmother grabbed her cloak and fled. She would try to start a new life somewhere far away, but everyone knew who she was and what she had done. Her shame would follow her forever. Ashenputtel's reign had begun. Justice, harsh, unyielding, and unstoppable, had finally taken its shape. The stepmother's world crumbled completely. Relatives turned her away with cold eyes. Friends slammed their doors. Even the church refused her sanctuary. Every place she sought for shelter, comfort, or forgiveness shut her out. She ended her days exactly as she had forced Ashenput to live, scrubbing floors in a dimly lit tavern, sleeping in cold corners, surviving on scraps and the pity of strangers. Only now there was no excuse and no disguise. Ashenput had been innocent. The stepmother had not. Meanwhile, the celebration of Ashenput's triumph roared on deep into the night and spilled into dawn. When she and the prince finally retired to their chambers, the first rays of sunlight brushed the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and gold. Their room was a dream, tapestries on the walls, a four-poster bed draped in silk, the hearth crackling gently. Every luxury the kingdom could offer was now hers. Ashenput stood quietly in the center of the room, feeling the weight of everything she had survived. She should have been happy. She was, truly. And yet beneath that joy, something raw churned. Memories of ashes, cruelty, and years spent disappearing under the weight of someone else's hatred. The prince stepped close, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Are you tired?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted, "but I don't think I can sleep. Too much excitement, too much everything." He turned her to face him. "Then tell me all of it. I need to understand." And she did. She told him everything of the stepmother's relentless cruelty, the nights spent scrubbing until her hands bled, the taunts and the ashes, the name they forced on her. She spoke of the secret midnight balls, the tree that had whispered hope, the birds that had come when she needed them most. She told him of the terror she felt when her stepsisters mutilated themselves in desperation. Every wound and every stolen chance poured from her like a fire long contained. The prince listened, his expression darkening with every word. He saw the scars beneath her strength, the resilience that had carried her through years of silent suffering. When she finished, silence fell heavy between them. Then he said, voice low and trembling with anger, "I should have them arrested, your stepmother, for what she did. It's criminal, it's—" But he couldn't finish. Ashenput gently placed her hand over his. "Please, they are already punished. Let it end here. Let it rest. They abused me for years, and now they are blind, broken, and cast out. Justice has been done." "The birds," the prince murmured, still stunned. "Your mother's birds that was real?" "Yes," Ashenput said softly. "Real magic, I think. My mother promised she would help me, and she did, even beyond death." The prince considered this, the firelight reflecting in his eyes as he grappled with the idea of a love strong enough to reach from the grave, a flock of vigilant birds carrying out a mother's final promise. "I believe you," he said. "I saw them, I saw what they did. I thought the stories were just tales, but now I know better." They stood together in the warm glow, holding each other quietly, bound by grief, survival, and the first stirrings of hope. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again," he whispered. "You are safe now, my wife, my queen." Ashenput wanted to believe him, and she did, mostly. But a part of her, shaped by cruelty and secrecy, would always remember fear. That part would never completely rest. Yet perhaps that was a kind of strength, to be broken and still rise, to survive and still hope. She kissed her husband and let herself be held. As she slid beneath the silk sheets, a world away from the ashes that once defined her, she heard a faint sound, soft cooing, the flutter of wings. Her mother's birds still guarding the palace gardens, still watching, still ready. Years passed. Ashenput became queen when the old king died. She ruled with wisdom, compassion, and the iron strength of someone who had seen the darkest corners of humanity and chosen to do better. She became a champion for the voiceless, opening shelters for women seeking refuge, reforming laws to protect daughters, ensuring no girl would ever be pushed aside or erased again. She never forgot where she came from. The ashes and the shadows of her past lived in her heart, shaping her justice, guiding her mercy. Every decree she made carried the memory of a girl who once had nothing, and she ensured the world would never forget. From ashes, even the smallest spark can rise to light. Ashenput and the prince were blessed with children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. She raised them with a balance of love and discipline, shaping them into kind, strong, and thoughtful leaders. And she told them stories. Not the sanitized, glossy fairy tales the kingdom adored, but real stories. Tales of cruelty, of survival, of injustice and resilience. Stories of what the world could do to those who had no power, and why it was their responsibility, their duty, to wield whatever strength they had to protect the vulnerable. She visited her mother's grave often. The hazel tree had grown massive now, its branches spreading like arms reaching for the sky, its trunk thick and enduring. White birds nested there by the hundreds, filling the air with wings and soft coos. She would sit beneath the tree, talking to her mother as if she could hear her still, telling her of her children, her victories, her sorrow, the weight of the crown, and the small, quiet joys of daily life. Sometimes, when she was alone in the silence of her chambers, she would cry, not for her children, not for her husband, not for her kingdom, but for the childhood stolen from her, for the girl she might have been if her mother had lived, for innocence lost forever, a fragment she could never reclaim. But mostly she felt gratitude. She had survived. She had risen from the ashes. She had claimed a life that had once seemed impossible, and she had built it with her own hands. Her stepsisters, she never saw them again. Occasionally, whispered reports reached the palace. They lived together on the fringes of the kingdom, unmarried, bitter, and broken. Needlework became their only livelihood, a skill that demanded little depth perception, little interaction with the world. Their lives were shadows, filled with the quiet ache of wasted youth and the constant reminder of what they had lost. Ashenput could have helped them. She could have offered money, positions, comfort, even a place in her household. But she chose not to. Not out of cruelty, not for revenge. She chose something simpler and harder, justice tempered with clarity. Some wounds she knew could never truly be healed. They had made their choices. She had made hers. And life, she understood, did not require universal redemption. The stepmother died first, alone, in a charity house for the indigent. No one attended her funeral. No one mourned her. The stepsisters lingered longer in the world. The eldest died at 40, succumbing to an infection that began in her ruined eye socket and spread insidiously to her brain. The younger sister endured another decade, her body slowly wasting away from an unrelenting illness, isolated and forgotten. When news of their deaths reached the palace, Ashenput said a brief prayer, a formal, courteous ritual, not one born of deep feeling. Then she returned to her life, to her children, her responsibilities, her husband, who still looked at her after decades with unwavering love. She had won her happily ever after, but it was not the storybook version. There were no sparkling endings without cost, no perfect justice, no innocence untouched. It was complicated, stained, real. And Ashenput had learned that real, with all its shadows and contradictions, was far more valuable than perfect. Her father lingered in memory only faintly, the man who had stood silent while she suffered, who had remarried too quickly, prioritizing comfort over his daughter's safety. He died 5 years after her wedding, felled by a sudden fever that claimed him in 3 merciless days. Ashenput attended the funeral out of obligation. She stood by his grave and felt nothing. No anger, no love. Only a quiet recognition of the man he had been, flawed, weak human. He had failed her when she needed him most, yet he had also been the father who held her on his knee, who had brought her gifts from his travels, who had loved her mother. Complicated, neither wholly good nor wholly bad. She said the prayers, scattered the earth, and turned away. She never visited his grave again. Her mother's tree, alive and vigilant, was enough. The prince, her husband, her partner in life and in heart, grew old alongside her. 40 years they shared, 40 years of love, of struggle, of small quarrels, of forgiveness and tenderness. They were not perfect. They disagreed, they hurt each other in minor ways, as all married couples do. Yet they endured. They loved truly. And that Ashenput understood was more than most ever received. It was enough. It was real. He died at 65, peacefully in his sleep. Ashenput was holding his hand, feeling the last warmth fade. She mourned him fully, publicly, as a queen should. A year in black, ceremonies, the measured grief of a kingdom watching their queen grieve. Yet privately, in the quiet hours of the night, she allowed herself a strange thought. She was free again. Not from cruelty this time, not from suffering or fear, but free from obligation, from the relentless weight of ruling, from the constant need to be everything to everyone. Her children were grown, capable, her kingdom stable. She could finally step back, retire to a smaller estate, live quietly, comfortably, rest. At 72, she returned to the house where she had grown up. Empty now, silent, abandoned after her father's death. No one wanted it. Everyone whispered about it, cursed, haunted, a house heavy with memory and shadow. Perhaps it was. Ashenput walked through the rooms slowly, letting her gaze rest on every corner. The parlor where her stepmother had smiled and lied. The kitchen where she had slept in ashes. The attic where she had been locked away. It was smaller than she remembered, dingier. Mundane, just a house, wood and stone, and nothing more. She had allowed her memories to turn it into a monster. But now, old, tired, and victorious, she could see clearly. This was not the house of her fear. It was the place where she had been forged, where she had learned endurance, patience, and cunning, where she had risen from nothing to everything. For a moment, she considered fire a dramatic erasure of the past. But she did something better. She had it converted into a sanctuary, a home for young women who had no one, who had suffered, who had been abandoned. She filled it with light, warmth, teachers, healers, and hope. And in the kitchen, the same place where ashes had once been her mattress, a plaque now read simply, "From the ashes we rise." It was the final act of her life's story, a circle completed, a promise kept. Ashenput was 80 when she knew her time was near. Not ill, not sick, simply tired. The kind of tired that sleep cannot erase. She made her preparations carefully, saying goodbye to her children and grandchildren, putting her affairs in order. And on a bright spring morning, she did what she had done every week for the past 65 years. She visited her mother's grave. The hazel tree had grown enormous, ancient, and wise. Its branches reached skyward like silent prayers. The white bird's descendants, or perhaps the same birds, ever watchful, nestled in the branches by the thousands. Ashenput settled at the tree's base, her back against its trunk, closing her eyes. She felt peace. She had lived a life that was full, meaningful, hard one. She had survived horrors meant to destroy her. She had loved, been loved, and built a life of purpose. She had helped others rise from their own ashes. She had won. "Thank you, Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling in the morning air, "for keeping your promise, for sending the birds, for helping me when I needed it most." The tree rustled softly, almost like a reply, and the birds began to sing, the same song they had sung at her mother's deathbed, the same song when the magical dress appeared, the same song that had heralded revenge at the wedding. And now it was different, welcoming, gentle, almost like words. Come home, your work is done, come home." Ashenput smiled. Sunlight kissed her face. She felt the warmth of the tree against her back, the weight of the years lifting. Slowly, peacefully, as if surrendering to the calm after a storm, she let go. When she was found the next morning, she was beneath the tree, eyes closed, a faint smile on her lips. Dead but never truly gone, for something strange remained. The birds continued to watch, the tree continued to stand, and on quiet nights those passing by would swear they heard voices. Two voices, mother and daughter, reunited at last, laughing, talking as if time had no hold over them. Young women seeking courage, hope, or an escape from suffering often found gifts left quietly. A coin when needed most, a dream that whispered advice, a stroke of luck that shifted everything. Magic. Subtle, enduring, just enough to give a life-changing moment. The story did not end with Ashenputtel's death. Stories never truly end. They change form, take on new lives, become warnings, prayers, promises. And the hazel tree still stands. The birds still sing. Mothers still tell their daughters, when you are in need, when the world seems cruel, when hope seems lost, plant your tears in the earth, wait, and help will come. Perhaps not in the way you expect, perhaps not quickly, perhaps not perfectly, but it will come, because mothers keep their promises, even beyond death, even against the world's cruelty, even when justice demands sharp beaks. The story ends not with a tidy, happily ever after, but with truth, complicated, harsh, necessary. This is the story of Cinderella, the real one, not the sugar-coated fairy tale, but the girl who rose from ashes, protected by her mother's promise, aided by birds, and loved despite everything. The stepsisters mutilated themselves for a crown they never deserved. The stepmother destroyed her daughters, chasing a dream that belonged to no one. Justice was served, subtle and brutal. It is a story of survival, endurance, and power, a story of mothers and daughters, of promises kept beyond death, of love that transcends the grave. And now this story is yours. It's a story about the price of vanity, about the cost of cruelty, but also about the cost of survival. Because Ashenputtel paid a price too. She lost her innocence. She lost her childhood. She lost the ability to ever feel completely safe again. She won, but winning is never clean. The Disney version ends with a kiss at a wedding. This version ends with blood on the church steps, birds singing in a hazel tree, and two sisters living out their lives in darkness. Which version is true? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Stories are strange that way. They are mirrors and masks. They are truth and myth intertwined. The brothers Grimm collected this story from old women in Germany. Women who had survived wars, plagues, and hardships we can scarcely imagine. Women who understood that life wasn't fair, that suffering isn't always noble, that sometimes to survive you must do terrible things and do them without shame. They told this story to their daughters, their granddaughters, passing it down through generations. Not to entertain, not for comfort, to warn, to teach, to say this is what the world can do, this is how cruel people can be, and this is how you endure. This is what happens to those who hurt you. We sanitized it. We thought children couldn't handle it. The violence too raw, the revenge too brutal, the message too dark, but maybe we were wrong. Maybe children need to know the world is dangerous, that people will hurt you, that sometimes no prince, no rescuer, no magic will come, that sometimes you must save yourself. Maybe they need to know it is okay to feel anger, to want revenge, to recognize that the punishment of your tormentors can bring satisfaction, even if it's horrifying. Stories can teach children that being a survivor doesn't erase the pain, that trauma leaves scars hidden beneath fine dresses and crowns, that you can be both victim and victor, fragile and strong, broken yet unbowed. Or maybe not. Maybe children deserve their innocence, their safe stories, their belief that good always triumphs cleanly, that villains always receive exactly what they deserve, that love conquers all without complication. Perhaps I am wrong, perhaps I am too honest. But this I know, the story I have told you is older than the sanitized version. It survived hundreds of years because it meant something to those who lived it, to those who told it. And it still means something today, because there are still girls sleeping in metaphorical ashes, still stepmothers, mothers, fathers, siblings, partners who abuse, belittle, and destroy. Still people who would mutilate themselves for shoes that were never theirs to wear. Still birds watching, still justice waiting, still mothers keeping promises from beyond death. This story has not ended. It is told every day, in every place where someone suffers, survives, and rises from the ashes. So sleep now. Dream of hazel trees and white birds. Dream of dresses spun from moonlight, slippers forged from gold. Dream of girls who survive impossible things and build impossible lives. Dream of justice, messy, complicated, and real. And when you wake, if you wake, remember, the birds are still singing in the hazel tree. The tree still stands on the grave of a mother who loved her daughter enough to defy death itself. Somewhere a girl covered in ashes is washing her face, straightening her back, refusing to be broken by the cruelty of those who should have protected her. The story is not over. It never will be. Sleep well. And may your dreams be kinder than this story, but no less true.